Rich Larsen.
What it takes to ride a motorcycle. The majority of riders don't have a lot of fundamental control. You don't have the balance, you don't have the body position, you don't have the proper throttle and clutch control.
What is the key to getting into that focused mindset of training?
I believe that the best riders in the world have the highest ability to deliberately focus on their weaknesses. Those guys all have an innate sense of, I'm not 100% on this, I'm gonna be 100% on this.
We're not speaking about what it takes mentally in order to get there.
I did it all wrong when I was racing. I always focused on everyone else. You're here to do something that you just love to do, right? You have the ability to ride at your highest level now. Everything is exactly the way that it's supposed to be. The truth is, if I could go back, I would break my finger 100% again.
All right, Rich Larsen, welcome to the AdGas podcast. Honestly, it is so cool to have you on here. And I'm really keen to be diving into not only the topics of hard enduro, but also the coaching side and the training side, technique side about riding an off-road bike.
I'm so stoked to be here. You guys are doing an amazing job. I love the content that you're putting out, and it's good for the sport, man. We need more stuff like this, and it's growing the sport. That's what I'm all about. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome, man. We're just passionate about riding off-road bikes and hope that we can share that passion with other people and get them on their bikes riding off-road motorcycles. But listen, you are really well known from the coaching side and the technique side, breaking down what it takes in order to master riding an off-road motorcycle. You have the Essentials program, which is something that you develop, which is 3 key pillars. Can you take us through what it took and your thought process of developing those 3 key essentials of riding an off-road motorcycle?
Yeah, man. It's an ever-evolving thing. It's always evolving. I've been teaching for a long time. I started probably doing private lessons, like one-on-ones, like 10 years ago. And that developed into doing big group lessons and group clinics around the US. I've been doing that pretty heavily for the last 5 years, enough to develop my business. And, I'm kind of on the road every 2 to 3 weeks, getting as many clinics and teaching as many people around the US as I can. Through doing that, I learned along the way, the majority of riders don't have a lot of fundamental control. Plain and simple, it's like the majority of riders go on the same rides over and over. I see the same thing. I mean, I can't tell you how many times when I was first doing private lessons, guys would be like, okay, I want you to go on this ride with me and tell me what I'm doing wrong. And so we would do that, and I'd be like, yeah, you don't have the balance, you don't have the body position, you don't have the proper throttle and clutch control for this situation. And it was almost like, yeah, this is what you're doing wrong, but I can't teach you it here. I have to teach you it, the basics, the small pieces of it first, and then develop you into getting into those gnarly situations. So through just teaching and teaching and teaching, just like anything, just like riding, teaching is exactly the same. You have to practice it. And the more you practice it, the more you see the little things that make the difference in the approach. And, as I continued to kind of develop, I learned about what it takes to ride a motorcycle. I just thinking about it all the time and making videos and teaching it, you start to see all those little things. And it kind of, from there, I wanted to simplify it and then build on top of it. So I kind of simplified it into the balance, into the body position, and into the power delivery of the bike, and learning how to essentially isolate each of those 3 things and build on top of it. So we'll isolate your balance, we isolate the body position, we isolate the power delivery and collection. So you're not throwing yourself into a boulder or a wall or a rock or whatever. You're learning the very basics of it, isolating that, and then developing it to build that full foundation to then be able to find your maximum progression. And that's what you're always searching for, is a continued progression. Something that you said, I say mastery,
Mm.
it's a pursuit of mastery. I don't think that there is a mastery. I think there's only the pursuit of it. And I also say that every rider's mastery is relative. It's relative to the person.
Mm.
Your mastery might be different than mine, but it's searching for the highest level that you are capable of. And the
Mm.
best way to do that is first build the base, first build the foundation, and then build on top of it. Sounds
Mm.
simple, to be honest, and it is, but it's the majority of riders don't do it.
Yeah, of course. I think just the lack of time to get riding, as well as just the effort it takes to actually take it a step back. You're a big advocate too of if you can't do it on a flat ground, then how are you expecting to do it in the mountains? And
Yeah.
and that's also another topic that I want to speak about is just like those focused training sessions. It's something that we all take for granted. It's we always just want to get on our bike, twist the throttle, and roost through some dirt out the back end and just rip it through the forest or up some hills. Like, what is the key to getting into that focused mindset of training? Because honestly, it's something that I also struggle with. Yeah, we only have a certain amount of time. So how do we convince ourselves that doing some drills around cones and clutch control and even with a motorcycle off is the way to go?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I believe that the best riders in the world have the highest ability to deliberately focus on their weaknesses. That's what makes them the best. And that sounds very simple. It's like, well, obviously, yeah, they focus on their weaknesses. But if you really think about that and you apply that to your own riding, how many times have you gone out, unloaded your bike, and rode the same trails over and over? How many times have you done the same exact thing and kind of hit that plateau? I see so many riders that I just kind of plateau. And it's because they don't want to take that step back and relearn the fundamental controls. Something that I kind of liken it to is the understanding that, it's like, think of it like a basketball player. You'll see a basketball player practicing with two basketballs. Now, on the basketball court, in a game, there's never two basketballs.
No.
But the ability to do it is the ability to do it, Same with golf. Like, how many times did Tiger Woods swing left-handed in like a Masters tournament? Now, that means that he's practiced left-handed before. Is it necessary? Does he ever really need to use it? Not really. But it's the ability to do it. And I think that there's something to be said about breaking all of the things that you're going to run into on the trail down into the basics. And if you have the ability to do the basics 100% as good as the guys that you look up to, as I said, the best riders in the world deliberately focus on their weaknesses. So I always ask people, do you think Manny Lettenbichler's going to struggle to weave through cones at 5 feet? No, he's
Probably
not going to have any problem
No.
doing it. If you want to ride like Manny, well, maybe the first step is to do something that you are capable of doing at Manny's level. And everybody's capable of learning how to weave through cones. Everybody's capable of being able to do it to the absolute maximum, where you're so tight that you're literally moving each cone, but you have the ability to hold balance, keep your feet on the pace, and go through it. There's a certain point where there's a maximum point where you make the cones as close together as possible. You can't do it, right? And at that point, it doesn't matter what rider you are, wheels on the ground, there's a maximum level. Manny and you could both learn how to do it at that maximum level. Now, obviously, Manny would be able to do it right off the bat, but the average rider also has that capability. So instead of looking at it like, man, Manny's going up this insane mountain, or Tristan's going up this insane wall, or Billy Bolt's seat bouncing pipe doubles, focus on this little basic thing that Billy could probably do in the fundamental and start to build in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one saying that I've heard that I like quite a bit, and it says technique is objective and style is subjective. The technique is the technique. We weighting the foot pegs, getting on the outside,
Yeah.
making sure that we're getting the traction, that stays the same. Where the style comes in is when, the rider maybe has longer legs, or, needs to do something a little bit different with his body in order to manipulate the motorcycle in a way that they wanted to. So I thought that's something that was quite interesting with me. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. And another saying that I like is high level riding is the rapid application of fundamentals. It's how quickly you
Mm,
can apply those fundamental controls.
mm,
It's not just bashing through things. There
yeah.
is a base. And those base are flat ground drills,
Mm,
cone weaves, proper clutch control. I mean, even doing, I believe in there's a lot of coordination that goes into riding a motorcycle. So there's a lot of little coordination drills that
mm.
you can do as well, that will transfer over to your ability to continue your progression forward.
Yeah. Would you say it's correct in saying that a lot of these techniques, in somewhat way, come from a trials perspective? They come from, like even the technique like a double blip, which took quite a bit of like like a famous headlines with inside the hard enduro scene. Like everyone knows what a double blip is.
Yeah.
Why are these techniques coming from trials, and like what makes them so important when it comes to fundamentally riding on a bigger off-road motorcycle?
Yeah, well, I think especially in hard enduro, it's so key. Um, One of the big things is the understanding of traction.
Mm,
How the best guys in the world get traction in the gnarliest situations, and there's so many variables within body position and balance and the understanding of peg weight as
mm,
well as the throttle and clutch control.
mm,
Something I say in videos and clinics is the best riders in the world have the highest ability to transition from maximum output of throttle power
mm,
to minimum output to power quickly.
mm,
So that transition from maximum to minimum, the quicker you can make that transition, the easier it's going to be for you to establish momentum, then maintain momentum,
mm,
right? The maintaining momentum is the hard part. Putting the power down and holding it wide open to get the bike to move is somewhat easy, but maintaining it after you get the movement is the hard part. In
mm.
trials, there's no momentum, right? Everything is right up against the obstacle. So that's a huge piece of hard enduro, right? Because a lot of
Yeah,
times you're on the side of a hill
absolutely.
with zero momentum. In trials, there's a huge level of obviously balance and that understanding of where your body is in relation to the outside forces on the machine, whether that's throttle, the output of power, or the obstacle that you're hitting.
Mm,
The understanding of body position, balance, and that power all together, it's the fine control that trials riders have. In hard enduro, obviously there's a little more speed, but a lot of hard enduro is not the transfer sections, it's the
mm,
technical sections. It's the
mm.
technical sections you can lose 10 minutes. The transfer sections are just those higher speed places where also, truthfully, nowadays with Billy and Manny and Tristan and Cody and all the
Fast.
dudes,
Yeah.
they're all so fast. Like those guys
Yeah,
rip. I mean, obviously we've seen Billy can rip motocross 100%.
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So these guys are so good at the transfer sections now
Mm,
as well. But I think originally the technical aspect of trials, that ability to hold traction in the technical situations and put your body in the right place to maintain traction, ends up creating those gaps between the
mm,
guys who grew up on trials and the guys who didn't. But
mm,
although there are guys who didn't grow up on trials who train trials a lot now, I
mm.
think. But yeah, there's only a few outliers. The majority of them rode a lot of trials.
Yeah, that's something that we've definitely seen a shift of. And speaking with a lot of the guys in the industry, it's, the younger generation these days are training specifically for hard enduro. Where
Yeah.
back in the day, it was more the trials guys doing trials, getting on an enduro bike and being like, I'm pretty good at this. Example, Graham Jarvis, going
Yeah.
to Hell's Gate on the back of someone's support and just being like, let me just go see how this race is, and Romaniacs as well, and then end up winning it, and without even realizing that he's got that skill so dialed inside
Yeah.
a setting and in a sport that's evolving the way that it is. But coming back to the topic of the coaching and the clinics, like As an aspiring coach myself, getting into becoming an off-road coach with Chris Birch and Say No to Slow, I'm constantly finding it difficult to find the right vocabulary in order to break down these techniques for beginner riders in order for them to have that good understanding of the technique or the drill that we are trying to do. Through this, I can see a lot of mistakes that I've made in order from the coaching perspective, being like, hey, hang on, I need to get to a simpler term of how to explain this technique. It makes all the sense in my brain right now, but it's clear that they're not getting it. But then on the other end, the riders often have these common mistakes that I find in the beginning stages of these clinics. Maybe you can share some of from your perspective, like what are the most common off-road mistakes that people are actually making that are joining your clinic from the first time? They haven't done any online training, not really dabbled in the coaching space or training space at all. Like what are some things that they are doing incorrect pretty much off the bat?
I think I think it depends on the age. But a lot of my clinics are 30 and 40-year-olds, guys who have probably rode for a long time, but they have a lot of built-in habits. And the built-in habit that I probably see the most is a very knees forward, straight up position on the machine. So they ride very straight up and down, and their knees are in front of their toes. I think there's a time and a place where you do drive your knees in front of the toes. But a lot of guys just kind of ride in this kind of rounded back, but they're straight up and down. Their knees are completely forward, in front of those toes, and that's a tough one because explaining like, you got to pull your knees back, and truthfully, we lock our knees a lot. That's one of those ones where it's like, what? You lock your knees, and so you have to learn how to simplify the explanations as best as you can. And truly, teaching is about reading people. So you all I do is look at people's eyes all day. I got 20 riders and I'm talking and I'm looking at every single rider. And if I'm seeing people that are kind of like not sure, you can read that on someone. And then, maybe I'll make an adjustment in the way that I'm saying it, try a different metaphor, try a different understanding, and then it will start to click. With the knees forward thing, usually it's kind of like, wait, you lock your knees. I'm like, yeah, I like to lock my knees, pull my, dropping the heels, leading with the head, learning how to get your head in front of the bars. And, I can show pictures of the top moto guys doing it, and even the enduro guys, enduro GP guys, and even into enduro cross and hard enduro. I'll show the pictures, but that kind of stuff is almost more like after class. I'm like, hey, see what I was talking about. Something that I will try to do is just try to give you an example that makes the most amount of sense. So it's like, why would you lock your knees? Well, if your knees are locked, you've actually created the most amount of space on the motorcycle to then be able to make a counteraction. So if your knees are bent, it's like static sag. You're sitting on the bike. Well, there's not quite as much suspension compression to be had compared to the bike on the stand where the suspension is completely decompressed. So if you're locking your knees, you've created more space to then be able to bend your knees and bend at the hips to absorb whatever the outside force is. So it's like, oh, okay, I see. There's more space for absorption. That can help click a little bit. And then, I've got 20 different metaphors. If that one doesn't fit, I'll go through different ones. So you have to learn, firstly, I think a big thing is reading people. You do it for a long time and you'll hear the same questions. You see the same kind of reactions to what you're saying, and you get tighter as you continue to teach and hone in your curriculum. Something that I have found, as I said earlier, I used to go on rides with guys and tell them what they were doing wrong. But really what that ends up being is me going, yeah, you're doing this wrong. You need more fundamental control. Yeah, you did that wrong. You need more fundamental control. We could do a cone weave, or we could do a full lock turn, or we could do some balance practice or some clutch control practice that will help you here. So it's less hands-on and it's more broken into drills. Essentially, my curriculum has developed over years of doing it and honing it. Every single class I sit down and write what I could do better and say, oh, this one didn't work that great, or maybe I should change around the direction, and I want it to kind of flow and build into an overall control. I always say for someone that's teaching or wanting to really develop their own curriculum and continue to teach, figure out some drills. Drills. And think about, go out and look up drills and watch drills and learn how you could maybe make your own spin on it. You know, you could take one of my drills and you would have a little bit of a different perspective. You could add something different to it and take that and apply it, and then show how it applies to regular riding, explaining how these drills apply to regular riding. You know, so I keep mentioning the cone weave randomly. I keep saying cone weave because that's an easy one. Everybody knows. Straight line of cones, you weave through them. That sounds really easy, but the majority of riders can't do it. And even people listening will be like, I could do it, but they've never done it before. And it's very, very hard to weave through cones at 5 feet. It's a very challenging drill. If you think about your approach of an obstacle, you know, say you don't have a full run and you need to get your feet on the pegs, find balance before you execute a double blip or a ledge or whatever. That understanding of the cone weave is almost more important than the obstacle itself. Everybody wants to learn how to go up the rock or the cliff, but the balance before has to be completely dialed or you're out of balance. And if you're out of balance, you really can't do much more than correct your balance. You're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage if you're hitting a cliff and you're out of balance, right? So that's why it's so key. That's why the basics are so key, and they're so overlooked, and they're so, I mean, honestly, they're boring. They are. But man, they're necessary.
Back to that focused training, right? Just to convincing yourself that this is the way that you need to go in order to elevate the skills. One thing that you mentioned now with the most common mistakes that some riders make is the knees forward, knees in front of the toes. And honestly, I see this so often as well inside our clinics here in China. And one thing that I saw from AJ Catanzaro that actually made a lot of sense is that as humans, we really want to get our face and our head away from the danger. And I see that when I see new riders riding an off-road motorcycle. They've got the confidence on the throttle and the clutch because they've been riding street for years. But when it comes up to an off-road section and they're standing up, it's like they're almost like, oh, no. And they're trying to move their head away from the danger. And then that just throws everything out.
You're coming at it. You know, that's something that, you know, we apply the body position that I'm talking about, where we're really leading with our head, putting our head way in front of the bars, locking our knees, straightening, you know, having two angles, your upper body's here and your lower body's here. You're dropping your heels, leading with your head. And then you go back to braking position. You learn that acceleration, deceleration position, and you apply it to an obstacle. And so many riders revert back to going like this. And the crazy thing is, this is something I say in every class, and I've said this in so many videos. If you go on Instagram and see somebody get kicked over the bars when they hit a log, we've all seen the videos of guys hitting a log and getting kicked over the front of the bars. The comments are like, he should have leaned back more.
Right.
Which is wrong. Which is like, no, that's like the Instagram experts, bro. They're out there and they think it's lean back to get to stop that kick, and it actually loads the slingshot. That's another AJ Catanzaro. AJ and I did a clinic together here in Utah, and that's what he said. He said, when you lean back, you're loading the slingshot to get slung forward. And it's 100% true. You have to do the opposite. You have to throw your face at the danger, at the log. So then you create the space to then react to the rebound. Something I say is rebound always happens no matter where you are on the bike. It's always going to happen. Your suspension compresses and rebounds. If you're back, you can't move any further back. So that rebound's going to happen. It essentially goes into your body and kicks you forward.
Yeah.
If you're forward, you have the ability to move back. And that makes all the difference in the approach, but it is so counterintuitive. And a
Yeah.
lot of it is, man. So much of riding is counterintuitive.
It's all just like the counter opposite of the motorcycle, trying to counterbalance it. But the
Yes.
motorcycle's going forward, you want to be going the opposite direction to try to
And
counterbalance
if you
that.
think about it, you're always in front of the force. That's
Absolutely.
what you're always trying to
Yeah.
be, is in front of the force. So you're not necessarily reacting. You're initiating. You're in front. You're creating you're staying in front of whatever is going to happen. So if you go
Yeah.
up the face of a jump, you move forward. If you're decelerating, you've already initiated back because the force wants to push you forward. It's just the opposite in every way. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
weird. To be in front of the force, you have to do the opposite of what you would think.
Yeah, and always the body position needs to be first before the input on the motorcycle. So before
Yes.
acceleration, head goes forward. Before braking, hips come back. These things need to happen before that. So before you hit the obstacle, you need to be in that correct body position. But man, yeah, we could be speaking on the whole day about off-road technique. I absolutely love this topic, but I want to move it.
In my
Yeah.
classes, I'll do 8 hours a day. I'll talk about it for 16 hours for 2 days, and I'm ready to do it again. And there's so much to say about riding. There's so many nuances. There's so many things, but yeah.
Yeah.
Continue.
I wanted to move on to the topic of just like hard enduro, like world things at the moment. You know, you get like, you briefly spoke about Billy, Manny, Tristan, Cody, top riders in the world doing absolutely incredible things on off-road motorcycles. You mentioned a bit now about what you think they're really good at, and that's going from 100 to 0 in a very short space of time. Is there anything else that really set them apart from let's just say, a really good national rider? What makes them so much better and so much dialed into that technique compared to those riders?
Well, as I said earlier, I think all those guys have an innate sense of what their weakness is. So just like you said, how do we convince ourselves to work on the fundamentals when we want to go on the same ride?
Yeah.
Well, imagine Tristan. He doesn't need to convince himself to do the thing that he knows he's not 100% at. And it's like, if he's competing with Manny, it's like, why is Manny just this much faster in this situation? Or if he's competing with Billy, what is Billy doing? So those guys all have an innate sense of, I'm not 100% on this. I'm going to be 100% on this. I grew up racing with Tristan. I mean, I'm older. I came into racing later, all of that. But I did race with Tristan quite a bit. And him and I are buddies. He's like, I look up to him in a lot of ways, even though he's younger than me. Yeah. He's the man. And Tristan is one of the most, I think, Michael Jordan dudes that I've ever met. And what I mean by Michael Jordan is, we've all heard the stories about how competitive Michael Jordan is. Yeah. Tristan's very competitive.
I've seen that from just social media and the scenes.
He's competitive, dude. And he has this drive that I'm like, I don't have that. I'm like, I mean, I'm pretty good at riding, but he's really like, it's a whole different game. Just like you said, like how much of a difference are the best guys who are good national riding? And the tip of the tip of the spear gets very, very sharp. And the difference between the guy who's in the top 20, top 10 guy versus Tristan is pretty crazy. I'll tell you a quick story, and this kind of goes into Tristan and what I mean by deliberate training. There was a race in Iowa where there was a ramp. It was basically like a little freestyle ramp that they had to jump across this little gully, one of the US Hard Enduro series. It was in the hot lap. They had a hot lap that was 2 minutes or whatever. It was for the next day lineup. Everybody goes. Tristan hits the ramp, hits it really fast, lays down the fastest time. uh, after the race, he came up to me and said, "Did you see anything that I could do better?" And at the time, I also do like to poke Tristan a little bit, poke the bear a little, because he's just so much better than me, so I like to trash talk a little bit. Um, and this was the truth. Cooper Abbott, at the time, he hit that ramp and he scrubbed it so hard. It looked really cool. I mean, it was like Cooper scrubbed it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, honestly, man, everything looked really good, but Cooper scrubbed that ramp a lot better than you. And he didn't like that I said that. I seemed like he was like, whatever, and he moved on. Well, the next day, I was talking to Spencer Wilton, another awesome dude, if you know Spencer Wilton. And he was like, "What did you say to Tristan?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, last night at dinner, Tristan wasn't saying anything." And I said, "What's going on?" And he was just sitting by himself at dinner. And he said, "I got to learn how to scrub ramps better." At dinner, I wasn't even there. So this dude, immediately, I said, "Cooper, scrub that ramp better than you." And Tristan was like, "I got to learn how to do that better."
Yeah.
And that is why Tristan has a number one plate on his bike.
Right.
And, I would assume in one way or the other, Manny is the same with, a different personality trait. Billy's the same. All of the best guys, all of the guys that I really look up to, they have that sense of I could be better at this. I'm going to be better at this. And that sounds so simple, but it is so hard to make yourself constantly do something that you're not good at.
Yeah.
And, whether not good at is a relative term, because those guys are literally good at everything, but their focus is to always improve. And that sense is a key thing.
One thing that we've noticed, because we've been following the Hard Enduro World Championship quite a bit and speaking to the riders and really getting into watching slow-mo clips of what they are actually doing. And one thing that stands out to me is just how efficient these top riders are with their energy and with with everything, with every input that they're putting into, whether it's clutch control, throttle, braking, body positioning. Everything is so efficient and so scaled down to a micro scale of use of energy. And I think that's also one thing that really makes them so different to a lot of the top riders. Like you can have a top national rider clear a section, but he might be off the bike, pushing, losing all the energy, getting to the top of the hill, but that's using all that energy up. And I think that's also another thing that really for me stands out from these top riders. If you go to places like Hugh Salatan, which is a race in Indonesia, it's a wild race. Like all the top riders basically pretty much in the world are going there. They are not riding their factory bikes. They're riding stock standard bikes on most of them. So they're all on standard bikes. And then watching the locals like kind of compete against those top riders, you can just see this point being, shown, like just that level of efficiency when it comes to riding off-road bikes. But also another thing that happens at this race, which is it's quite interesting, is that they're riding stock bikes, as I mentioned. And this is also a question I wanted to ask you is, what does it actually mean having a factory setup bike? Like what, you said the tip of the sword is where things get really sharp. Is that sharpening the sword at that tip, or is it something that they could...
For sure. It's just like that I think it's in every, discipline of motorcycle riding. Bike setup does come into play, I think, at the high level. Those guys test a lot. They know what an extra 5mm of sag or a different offset or a different peg height or all of those little things. You got to think it does make a huge difference on the motorcycle. And I think there's also a lot that they do with mapping. And, I remember like in 2019, I was training with Colton Haker. I had the privilege of riding with him a lot in the late teens. And I remember Colton having 4 different CDIs that one of them said Jarvis, one of them said Gomez, one of them said other, one of them said Haker. And he was like, as we were riding, switching them, and then he would ride and switch, and then he would ride. And they all ran different, and so there is a level of, the way that they want their bikes set up and all of those little changes within computer and how they're delivering the power and all of that, I do think that that stuff does help a lot. That being
Mm,
said, I think that's the beauty of hard enduro, because those setups 100%, when Tristan is competing with Manny or Billy is competing with Manny, they need all of those little pieces.
mm,
But for those guys to compete with a guy who's on a stock bike, or say a satellite guy, a guy
mm,
who's running in 5th or 6th place, they can do it on a stock bike.
mm,
So I think there is a difference between what a setup can do, but I almost think the difference is a little smaller in hard enduro
mm.
compared to something like motocross,
Yeah.
or where the speeds are a little bit higher. I you know I The amount of changes that they're doing in MXGP, or Supercross or motocross, I think is a little bit higher level
Mm.
than what they're doing in hard enduro, although the setup does make a difference.
Tire choice, moose choice, making sure that you got the right compound tire can make the biggest difference
Dude,
in your experience riding off-road and hard enduro.
man. And yeah, the moose stuff, there's so much to be said about that.
Yeah.
I've tested so many different things and so many different compounds. Luckily I work for a good company,
Mm.
and they've allowed me to do a lot of testing, so I've learned a lot about how to feel a tire and stuff. And man, there's so much to be said about setup, and then
Mm.
not just the tire. How are you setting up your moose?
Mm.
Or what is your internal setup? We're seeing all these new, 360 lock, and
Mm.
guys going back and forth from air to back to moose and all of that. I don't know if this is true, but I did hear that at one point, Billy was riding a Michelin moose that they were shipping in like a drum of oil or something. They like shipped this moose around in a very specific way, and it was very expensive.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not, but
It
sounds
sounds
really neat.
yeah. It's what I've heard is that they were experimenting with weighting the wheel, so the outside of the wheel, to try to kind of increase also a bit of unsprung mass there, as
Sure.
well as just the inertia, the force, the driving force of that wheel. So when that wheel gets going, takes a lot for it to stop, compared
Right.
to
Yeah. And that makes sense, right? I mean, it's like a flywheel in a different way,
yeah,
right? The more weight on your
absolutely.
flywheel, although it makes it harder to bring the RPMs up, it takes away from the snap. It
Mm,
also slows the descending RPM, and that slow of descending RPM means you can create a further gap between throttle coming off and a feather of clutch. That
mm,
gap can go wider and wider as the flywheel gets heavier and heavier. So that would be exactly the same with
yeah,
a rear wheel, or in a different way. It's like
yeah.
if you put clutch weights on, I think a clutch spins a third as many times as the actual flywheel, right? So you
Mm,
could
mm,
adjust that way, and then you're talking about weight on the rear tire. All of
yeah.
that stuff comes into play.
Yeah, and what I've heard, I believe it to be quite true, but with Manny's bike and his setup, and also with the support that he has from KTM, and just being so close to factory, and Andreas, like just the whole situation, his bike is the furthest thing from stock that you can get from an enduro bike. All these things that you're talking about now have been tested, are being tested, and are being put into bike, because yeah, what I've heard, these bikes are the furthest thing from stock again. But when we're talking about sharpening the tip of the sword, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what it needs. That's what it takes in
That's what
order
they
for
have to
him to,
do to
yeah.
compete with it. Now they're looking for those little things, and
Mm,
I've heard a lot with KTM and certain like rev limiting
mm,
mappings that are creating just a higher level of traction. I mean, as
mm,
technology gets better,
yeah.
we're gonna see these things implemented, and we're gonna be going. I'm not gonna be, but they're
Mm,
going to be going
yeah.
up crazier and crazier and crazier things, and finding the limits of these motorcycles. Now, once again, though, Manny gets on a stock bike, he's going to be
Still,
really good too.
absolutely. Yeah.
So,
There's
but
still the thing.
it
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
tip of the spear, and that spear is sharp at the top.
Mm. It's just getting sharper. The what they're doing these days is insane, and
You
also
know,
just the ride with those juniors. Hey, like
oh yeah, dude.
just fanning out a bit, yeah, because we really love the sport of hard enduro. Watching Mitch Brightmore and
Oh, dude.
Ashton Brightmore do what they do on an off road. You probably had
It
the
was so
opportunity to watch them in TKO and that. It's just wild, eh?
last year in Super Enduro.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it was the best. It's
Mm,
like, man, these kids are coming and they
mm,
are so good, and they you can see that they want the speed that Billy has, and they're doing,
mm,
again, they're deliberately focusing. I can guarantee those guys watch film. They're doing
mm,
everything that they can do to compete. And yeah, man, it's exciting
mm.
because they're young and they're
Yeah.
so good. And there's some young kids in America here too that are driven. It's neat to see, man. I
Yeah.
can't wait for where the sport goes in the next 5 years.
Absolutely. I'm 100% on that train as well. And a bit of a shout out, yeah, to also a fellow countryman like James Moore. And there's a whole bunch of guys from South Africa just absolutely killing it in the junior side now, coming top 5 at Aberstone, or yeah,
Yeah,
fourth place in Aberstone. Like that's
yeah, dude.
super cool to see. And that's someone that has no trials experience, did
Yeah.
very little, does do some trials training now, but focuses on hard enduro. Like
And
that
so
is
that's
his
the
sport.
thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier. I think originally the trials riders were coming to hard enduro, and they had such a high level of tech,
Mm,
and they were going against guys who were like GP guys, and
yeah.
so they're those GP guys are fast and they ride a little bit of technical stuff, but when it gets into the real boulder field, it's like, okay, it's a little different,
Mm,
and those trial skills, that's where they would make all the difference. And as I said earlier, it's like in the transfer sections, the GP guys are great, or the
mm,
somewhat technical sections they can cook, but they lose 10 minutes in one boulder field, where
yeah.
that's where the trials guy makes up. He
Mm,
loses a minute in the transfer section,
yeah.
but he gains 10 in the technical. Well, now there's a specific form that is coming out of hard enduro that we see, these very specific little techniques that are practiced and focused. And I think now there's more of a down pack of what hard enduro is. It's
Mm,
like, okay, this is what the sport is. These are where the big rounds are. It's Erzberg, it's Romania, it's all, there's main places. And these guys have all raced there. There's plenty of footage. They see the things that they need to practice to deliberately get better at.
mm,
And they continue to focus completely on that. So I think we're actually seeing guys ride less and less
mm,
trials, although I do think it helps. I think if you're a kid that's,
absolutely.
8 years old, jump on a trials
Oh,
bike,
dude,
and
this, yeah.
it's like regular in Europe, but
Mm,
in America it's not. So
yeah.
yeah, that's a key piece that will build that base. But we are seeing a lot of guys who are very specific hard enduro athletes now.
Mm,
There's a way you can make a living if
yeah.
you're fast enough.
Yeah, exactly. In South Africa, it's very similar. There's no trials community there at all.
Right.
We grew up racing junior nationals, which is just an off-road style, like JNCC or a GNCC style of racing. And yeah, super fast. Wade was
Yeah.
there, Travis Teasdale, pretty much all these top. Matt Green was also the last like era of that junior nationals, and these guys are super fast when it comes to those transitions. And
Yeah.
then they working now at the later stages in life on getting the technique dialed, where someone like Graham had the technique dialed,
Yeah.
and then he saw Wade come flying past him in the transition stages and
Yeah.
going like, okay, I
But
need
I
to go
mean,
to
look
work.
at how far Wade has come,
Massive.
you know, from being that guy that was kind of like, oh, he'll just lift it over his back and run with
Bro,
it because
yeah.
he's such a savage. But now he's a very, I mean, yeah, well adapted rider.
Mm. So speaking, or probably one of the most unspoken topics when it comes to the sport in general, I think, is mental health. In a lot of ways, we're training for to get better on the motorcycle, getting more precise with our clutch inputs and our body positioning, and finding that the traction when we need it. But we're not speaking about what it takes mentally in order to get there. Bro, tell us about what it actually takes from that mental standpoint, and how can we, sharpen the tip of the spear, as we use that analogy once more, when it comes to strengthening that mental health.
Man, That's a great question, dude. I think I have good answers to that because
Mm,
I did it all wrong when I was racing.
mm,
I always focused on everyone else. And
mm,
that's such a, again, I feel like I simplify a lot of things in a lot of ways. Like it's like, well, don't just, and that's cliche. It's like, oh, just
mm,
focus on your race your race, right? But the reason things are cliche is because they're so true, it's stupid.
mm,
And I mean, that's the thing, man. I always was like, okay, I got to beat this guy, and I look at my heat, and okay, who's in my race? I can beat this guy. I can't beat this guy. I can beat. So you're already just, you're not present. You're not
mm,
here. You're thinking about. You're trying to figure out all of the outcomes before they even happen.
mm,
And I see it so much in a lot of the kids that I've trained. I've had the privilege of training a lot of the kids who are doing really well in the hard enduro nowadays. They get caught in this mindset that they need to work way harder and they're not doing enough, and it's always a I need to do more, I need to do more, I need to do more, which training is great. Work hard, do all those
mm.
things. But if you're not training your mind to be present on the race day, it's going to be 10 times harder for you to ride.
Yeah.
And learning that the riders aren't, your competitors aren't competitors. They are just other objects, other obstacles
Mm,
on the track. I can't tell you how many times I've seen good riders get passed by someone that they have a notion of how good they are. So let's say, my rider is riding as fast as he can, and he gets passed by someone that he thinks he should beat.
mm,
And then suddenly it's like, oh no, I'm a horrible rider. Why is this guy beating me? I should beat this guy. I'm better than this guy. And now you start to fall back, and now you're getting passed by another guy and another guy and
yeah.
another guy. And it's
Yeah.
it's those situations that expose the lack of presence, your ability to be where you stand. You know, I think that we've all heard the best guys, whether it's Jeremy McGrath or Ricky Carmichael or whoever, um, say, all I can do is go out and race my laps, put in my laps, and do the best that I possibly can.
Mm,
And I think that that is a really underrated approach. And I didn't even learn that until, I kind of dabble back into racing every once in a while in my 30s. It was like, oh man, in my 20s I just worried so much about, I'm working as hard as I can and I should be able to get this finish, but I've already failed before I even line up because I'm putting an expectation on it.
mm,
Learning how to have no expectations and say, I'm just going to go out and perform at the absolute highest level that I can perform and trust in where I finish.
mm,
Something that I've said a million times to guys is, one of my best races is not a race that I won.
mm,
It was a race that I rode. I got fourth, and but I knew that I rode perfect. I
mm,
rode exactly as fast as I possibly could. Everything that I did went exactly the way that it was supposed to go. I didn't make any mistakes. I was just there. I was present. I was in. And in finding that perfect ride, it doesn't have to be a win. It was just like, oh, that's what I've been searching for.
mm,
And what that is trusting that you have put in the work, you've put in, the time, and now you are going to go out and perform to the best of your ability.
mm,
Another thing I also say is trying to not look at races like they're bad races. Like, oh, I had a bad race. Um, because you never know if that bad race is going to be a paradigm shift that creates the next good race. There are no bad races.
mm,
There are no good races. There's
mm,
only you now and putting in the absolute best performance that you can put in. And it sounds so simple, but when you're on the line and you're looking at all the things, it snowballs. So learning how to reset and be present is everything.
Yeah, man. You said so many good things there. Super cool, man. Honestly, it's really cool to hear it. As someone also that has the same feelings on the start line of, trying to put themselves into position.
Yeah.
And I think, it just gets, you start realizing these things as you get older. There's just a level of maturity that
Yeah.
just a super, like, it just helps you find that mental health, helps you realize that it's not about the people around you, it's about finding that present. And also a lot of the things that mistakes I've made when I was racing when I was younger was just that compounding of negative thoughts led me down a bad road, which is not a good place to be going. So yeah, only now looking
You know,
back, I'm like, man, I should not have thought that.
yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
And, it's one of those things. It's like, I'm thankful for all of those
mm,
situations that happened to me because they gave me the awareness to say, oh, you know what? I did approach that and now I would approach it a little bit differently. I did
mm,
that. I approached that wrong at the time, but I needed that lesson for me to continue forward. And,
mm,
and yeah, man, it's so key to be able to see it when it's happening.
mm.
It's like when you're
That's
on the
it.
line and you're going, who's okay, who not even on the line.
No.
You're pulling into the race and you're
Mm.
already eyeing, oh, I didn't know he was going to be here. I didn't
Yeah.
know that guy was going to be there. Oh, is he racing? Oh man, I wonder if I can beat him.
Mm,
You got to catch yourself in that situation. Oh, okay, hold on a second now. You're here to do something that you just love to do, right?
mm. Exactly.
You're here to, you've already done all the work. You're not going to get any better or worse result
Mm,
by knowing this guy's here or that guy's there. It's not going to make any difference. You have the ability to ride at your highest level now. You can't do any more work because it's race day.
mm,
So trust that you've done that amount of work and only focus on you. Again, the other riders are just other obstacles.
mm. And
They
they're
might as
going
well,
through the same
they might as
mental
well be a rock.
yeah, and they're going through the same thought pattern as
Absolutely.
well. So everyone's fighting the same battle,
Yeah,
but just
everybody's doing
within
the same
what.
thing on the
Yeah,
line.
yeah.
But
No one's
nobody,
talking about
nobody thinks they are. You don't
no,
think that when you're on the
no.
line. You're like, I'm freaking out.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Okay,
so
I'm
is everybody
yeah,
next to you. We're in
yeah,
this together, guys.
yeah. But speaking about mental strength, the last topic that I want to speak about is just this crazy situation that happened to you not too long ago. You know,
I almost didn't know
break.
what you were talking about.
Yeah, oh,
I
bro.
was like, what?
Would look down and see the massive scar on your leg, and then
Oh yeah.
sharp reminder. But like, what happened that day, and how I think also just tying it back to the mental health topic, like,
Mm.
how did you get through that situation with such mental clarity and strength? Not freaking out, not putting yourself in a worse off position through those mental thoughts. I mean, you went as far as even like vlogging yourself basically through the situation and the thought process
Yeah.
that you were going through. Yeah, just how do you get to that point of being so strong in that situation? First, tell
Uh,
us what happened for the people that don't
yeah.
know,
So I
and then
was I was out riding
yeah,
hard enduro. I have some really cool hard enduro stuff here in Salt Lake.
mm,
And yeah, just another day. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go out and get a session
mm,
before, quick sesh today. And
yeah,
went up. I have a heart rate monitor of the whole thing too. It's kind of
mm,
interesting. Go up and yeah, hitting this gnarly loop that I've got. I was dropping back down into this riverbed, and it's a pretty steep downhill. Kind of a not there's it's really wooded area, really lot of bushes and stuff. As I was dropping into this creek on a pretty steep downhill, as I kind of turned in I think I'm pretty sure like a pine tree, like a little baby pine tree,
mm,
went up into my front tire.
mm,
And as it went up into the front tire, it like high sided me. So it's a steep downhill and I was turning into it. It high sided me. So I fell over. I think I fell, probably it felt like 10 or 12 feet, like kind of down.
mm,
I did a bit of a flip, landed on my left leg, I think on a big log, like a log about this big, and it snapped my femur in three places. Boom, boom. Two breaks into three pieces. And yeah, so my leg was behind me. Like my foot was like right here as I kind of like rolled in. I was like, whoa. I went, ah, like I made that noise. Whoa. And I grabbed my boot, which is not a cool thing for your boot to be right here,
Yeah.
and put it like back down into its place as I kind of settled into the creek. And I was like, oh, this is an ordeal. I've broke my femur. Um, I started, took a couple deep breaths. And honestly, and this is, no one's ever heard this before, but I figure this is a great podcast to tell it on. The first thing that I said, I took a couple deep breaths. I was like, okay. And I said, everything is exactly the way that it's supposed to be. And I pulled out my phone and I knew that there wasn't going to be any service. And I saw that there was no service. And I said, okay, now it's time to start dragging yourself to service. And I was in a downhill riverbed and it kind of opened up. So imagine you're in a canyon, there's a riverbed coming. The canyon kind of opens up a ways down. And I said, all right, I've got to start scooting down the riverbed with my femur. So I had to like pick up my leg because, your muscles don't work when your femur's broken in 3 pieces. So I had to pick up my leg and kind of like lift my boot down and then slide 2 inches and then pick up my leg and lift my boot down and slide. And I had like sticks where I could kind of poke rocks out of the way to keep scooting down. And yeah, man, I had to, I almost think it was helpful to not have anybody there. I mean, it would have been nice to have somebody there.
Yeah.
But who am I going to freak out to? I'm in the woods. There's literally no one around for miles. So it was like, you need to center yourself. And that's something that I say to myself I try to say to myself, just like we're talking about being present in racing, like I said earlier, there are no bad races. A bad race can be a paradigm shift that puts you into a string of good races. One bad situation can be something that changes everything, that puts you into 10,000 good situations. So the more you think about life, the more you realize that there are no real bad situations. There's bad things that happen, but most of the time, a lot of good comes from tough things. As we said earlier before we started the podcast, there's no growth without struggle. And in that situation, I knew I had to get home. I have a daughter and I have a wife, so I got work to do. Freaking out's not going to make any difference. Take some deep breaths, center yourself, get your heart rate down. Trust that everything is exactly the way that it's supposed to be, and then continue forward. And the truth is, I scooted down, got service, had to get a life flight out, put a rod in my femur. I'm still healing. That's the short or long story long already. But the point of that is, I have experienced so much in the last, that was done on June 9th. So it's been like 120 days or so, just over 100 days. In the last 100 days, I've experienced so many good things from this bad situation. So many people have reached out to me and been so amazing. I've met incredible people through this situation. I've experienced love within my family and my personal life that I don't think I ever would have experienced. And so many more personal things that have absolutely changed my complete perspective around existence. And the truth is, if I could go back, I would break my femur 100% again, because way more good has come from it than bad. So once again, there's no bad races. Everything's all good.
Bro, I think that's a pretty solid way to end this episode. Dude, thank you so much for sharing with us all your knowledge, experiences, and yeah, it's been an absolute treat speaking with you today. And I'm pretty sure the guys and girls listening to this are going to have a really good listen. So
Thanks, man. I appreciate what you're doing for the sport, and I am stoked to be on the pod. Keep doing what you're doing, man. This is exactly what hard enduro needs, and you're facilitating it for everybody. So thank you.
cheers, mate.